2 years of training, 2 minutes of a fight. Did CM Punk embarrass himself on Saturday night?
I wouldn't say that. I think 2 years of training sounds like a long build-up for a fight. 2 years is nothing in this sport, and I think that's what this is. This is not the UFC of the early days when guys walked in off the street and guys who were good in barroom brawls or where boxers could pick this up. This is a full-time job, and he looked like what he is, which is a 37-year-old guy who's probably a pretty good athlete, who's dedicated himself, but not for nearly enough time. There are levels to this sport, and we saw two fighters that were just like two completely different levels.
You think Punk will ever fight again?
I do, because I talked to him maybe a year ago. I had a long lunch with him in Chicago, and he was so into the process and so into mixed martial arts as a pursuit. I think, obviously, this is not the result he wanted, and I think Dana White's statement is completely fair. This did not look like a guy that belonged in UFC, but there is an awful lot of places to fight that are not UFC. He doesn't need the money. I think he really did feel galvanized by a competitive sport. I suspect we may well see him again, but the hype for this, I mean, he almost could not have won. He put himself in backed himself in such a corner. Some of that his own doing, some of that the UFC's doing, some of that just the set of circumstances. But I think on a lower level promotion, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw him again.
You know, Punk obviously brought in a lot of eyeballs, so I'm sure you would call that a win for the UFC in terms of dollars, but did it hurt the product as well to have a guy who clearly was not ready for a UFC fight at UFC 2?
Yeah, I think the opposite. I mean, I think when Brock Lesnar walks in, keep in mind Brock Lesnar is a world-class wrestler, but I mean, a college wrestler. When Brock Lesnar walks in and becomes heavyweight champ, people start saying, wait a second. What the UFC showed was that high-level MMA is a real sport, and you can't just, even with 2 years' time, even with full-time training in Milwaukee, you can't just pick this thing up overnight. So I think in the short term, UFC lost. I mean, obviously, Punk, as you say, drew a lot of eyeballs, and never mind, Overeem and Stipe. That was the headline bout for all intents. But I think in a way, the sport legitimized itself by how quickly he was beaten.
Okay, so CM Punk loses. Brock Lesnar won his last bout, but then tested positive for banned substances. Should UFC really be shutting the door on some of these wrestlers who want to come to the octagon?
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing also is the reverse, right? That Ronda Rousey and Paige Van Zandt, I mean, there are all sorts of offers from the WWE for some of these UFC stars. Yeah, I think that this pipeline, obviously these fighters come in with huge built-in fan bases, their talking points. It's a little bit of a jab to WWE. I mean, I think Dana loved the fact that not only had he poached one of their fighters, but, CM Punk, and every time he spoke, he talked about how it was good to be in a real sport, and he was done with play acting, and now it's time to move on. But I think that, maybe it's time to ease that pipeline a little bit.
Trust me, I'm still going to go in there and beat the kid up and get my hand raised. But as far as the story aspect of it and being inspirational, it's really corny to say, but it's not about getting knocked down. It's about standing back up. You brush yourself off. You keep going forward.